cabbage. So far, so good. Not what I thought I planted. And what I think we're gonna be able to get off of these. Hello, welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is, sorry. My name is Heather, and can you see the chaos that is happening right now? I thought that I would leave some of these volunteered tomatoes to see if I could work my way around them throughout the season, but I clearly can't. It's been raining quite a lot lately, and the tomatoes have loved it. There is supposed to be a path here, and I think I need to clear the path this week. I do have some tomatoes that are on the trellis, so there will absolutely still be plenty of tomatoes in here. This was fun while it lasted. You can see that our maypop vines have actually grown probably 3 or 4 times their size since we put them in a few weeks ago. They've finally grabbed the trellis and have started their way upward. This is good. They are a little bit small, but I got them through the mail, and so any kind of growth and establishment that I can get out of them this season, I'm going to be happy for it. As we make our way in, we can see how huge the volunteer sunflowers have gotten. Now this is a 2-foot bed, but I mean, it's probably 10 feet up there, which is really incredible. All of these sunflowers volunteered here from sunflowers that I grew last year. And I noticed yesterday that this little tiny one that's being shaded out by the rest, it opened yesterday. Isn't that gorgeous? Such a pretty little baby thing. As far as I know, that sunflower there and this sunflower here are the same type. This is just a difference of, you know, the light that it's able to get. This is a loofah gourd that actually volunteered over in one of the beds that's over there, and I moved it a few weeks ago, and it has started to really take off, and it's grabbing the trellis now, which is great. I'm excited to let this guy go wild on this side of the trellis. I didn't actually need more loofah gourd. I decided that I would grow it anyway though, just because I have a ton of loofah from the last couple years of growing loofah gourds, and I actually didn't realize how long a loofah would last, both in the shower and as like a dish sponge. They last for like an eternity. So I don't need to grow these every year, but we've got it, so I'll take it. This is an interesting story. I talked about this in a recent vlog. This broccoli plant, this is a Green Magic hybrid broccoli, and I grew a bunch of Green Magic hybrid broccolis here at the beginning of the year, and when it came time to harvest the broccoli, I actually did cut all of the plants down at the base of the soil and just left the roots in the soil to break down. This particular root actually grew an entire plant back, and not only did it do that, it put on a head for us, which actually this could be harvested really soon. I feel like if I don't get advantage of this soon, it's gonna go to flower because it's really hot here right now. Same thing over here. These cabbage plants went in at the same time as the broccoli, and they are nice and big. This red acre cabbage. I did harvest some of the leaves on the back there to make some coleslaw with, but I'll harvest the head this week. This guy here behind the tomato, big and beautiful. Ugh, I'm happy about that. We are in mid-June at this point, and mid-June is about when my brassicas finally have had enough. So that's good timing. Once these cabbages come out, it'll give some space and some nutrition for the tomatoes that are here to grow and do well. The tomatoes that I have here are Heatmaster hybrid tomatoes. They're not all doing awesomely. Actually, these were some of the smaller tomatoes that I had when I transplanted everything over, but they are starting to grow and starting to produce. I've got a lot of tomatoes down there and then some over here as well. But these Heatmasters are some of the bigger plants that I have, and they have some of the most fruit set. Glorious, lovely fruit, all green, and none of them are as big as they're gonna get, but we'll get there. The Heatmaster tomatoes that we're growing are a determinate variety, so they won't get super big, but they stay nice and bushy. So far, these tomato cages from Epic have been holding up really great. One of the things that I'm noticing is sometimes the branches that are coming off of the plant are getting a little bit big before I can actually get them kind of tucked in to the tomato trellis. So what I think I'm gonna do is actually take some tomato tape and kind of tie it to the side of the cage to help hold it up, because some of this fruit, as it gets bigger, it is going to weigh down these branches and they could snap. And we don't want that. We want the tomato plants to last as long as possible into the season. Now, I have grown this variety before, and they say with determinate tomato varieties that they only produce like a set amount of fruit. And And when I first started growing determinate tomato varieties, I assumed that that meant that it wouldn't be that much fruit. I don't know what it is about the Heatmaster, but they seem to break that rule. They will produce flowers all season long, and flowers equals fruit. So I guess we'll see what happens. I'd like to keep them as long as possible. This green stalk here I have full of dwarf and miniature tomatoes, and you know, it has looked worse. We have had quite the problem with aphids and whiteflies in this green stalk only, basically. And there has been a battle between the aphids and whiteflies. You can see quite a few here, maybe. I don't know, I'm seeing a lot less than I was, but the battle has been between those pests and the ladybugs. And for a while, it looked like the pests were winning, but now it looks like the ladybugs are winning. And can you see this? This is one of those in-between stages of a ladybug that you do not see very often. We're used to seeing the adult ladybugs, you know, those cute little red bugs with little black spots, and then their larva is an interesting looking thing too. I'm looking to see if I can find one, but this is in between that. This is a little larva that is trying to become the beetle form. And I believe that they're starting to win because these plants are starting to look better, and I hope that they can keep up. Now I'm a little bit worried about some disease starting to come on this plant or these plants over here. With all the rain that we're getting, this is not the best thing. But whenever I see disease on a tomato plant, this is all I do. I just come and pick it off very frequently. I'll just throw it down in the walkway. That may not be like the most ideal choice because diseases like blight can live in the soil and come back year after year, but we deal with blight all the time. It's something that's sort of, I guess, established here. I didn't put this garden in. Actually, the first owner of the farm planted in these beds, and when we moved here I had quite the awesome volunteer garden. Blight was here when I got here, and it's something we just kind of have to live with, and then I just pick off the blighty leaves as I can to help extend the life of the plants. It's been pretty rainy and pretty windy, and so some of these bigger plants are really starting to flop over, and I thought we were going to be getting some ripe fruit out of these plants this week, but it looks like they're gonna make us hold out for another week because I don't see any ripe tomatoes. But my goodness, there's a ton of fruit and a ton of flowers, and I'm excited. It looks like this is doing better than it was. The Kellaway Golden Chamomile, this has become one of my favorite spots in this garden space this whole year. They are just glorious and spilling out over the sides of the bed, being that attractor of pollinators that I hoped they would be. Now, we don't see a lot, I mean, there's flies all over the place, but right now I don't see a lot of the pollinators out. We have had a lot of rain this morning. There's a native bee, just flew away. They kind of look like little sweat bees, and that might be what they are. See them? It makes me so happy to see that we've planted something that the native bees are really enjoying. We do have some honeybee colonies on our property, and I like to think of our honeybees as well, but really, honeybees, this might be controversial, but honeybees don't necessarily need as much help and support and save the bees as people think. Honeybees have plenty of help with the commercial beekeeping industry, and that's also a little bit debatable, but we don't have to get into that. But really, it's the native bees that often get overlooked, and these guys are very important when it comes to like our local food systems and the sustainability of that. So we're real happy to see our native pollinators out, even though there's not very many out right now. We're in between thunderstorms as it is, but very exciting development from last week. I had talked about how our Carlos muscadine grapes seemed kind of stagnant and that they weren't flowering. Well, they've started to flower now. And isn't that cool? Such tiny little flowers. I do wonder if I'm gonna be able to smell it given all the rain that we've had. Yep, I can, and it's weird. It's very weird. There's a grape over here that we'll visit in a second just to see how well they're doing, because they're doing awesome. But those guys smell super sweet and floral and succulent. You just wanna eat it even though it's not ready to be eaten. This is a little bit more peppery with the smell. Definitely, like there's almost, it's like lemon pepper, like you'd have it on chicken. Almost savory, very bizarre. Different scent altogether. But yes, with the flowering means that we will start getting some of our muscadines starting to develop, which you can see happening right here. These are definitely bigger than the buds that were on here previously. Oh look, and we've got another ladybug friend. Happy to see you, sir, ma'am. Down here I have a volunteer squash, which I've been watching very closely because I do not yet know what type of squash it is. It could be a tromboncino squash. I'm kind of hoping that it is a Dutch fork pie pumpkin. I can't tell right now. It volunteered in the corner of this bed. These leaves are pretty fuzzy, and I don't remember the Dutch fork pie pumpkin leaves being super fuzzy, so this could be a tromboncino. I'm waiting for some flowers to be able to tell, but it's obviously branched out into the walkway here, which is what I had hoped for. And the plant, with its vine touching the ground as it is going to be putting down some more roots to be able to feed this vine, which I love. I had thought about putting down some weed barrier here to help the plant not get overrun by weeds later in the season, but I actually like this better because it's probably going to be needing the excess water and nutrition and everything that it can now get from the walkway. See there, huh? So we've got something coming. This doesn't look like the start of tromboncino flowers, but it also doesn't really look like the start of the Dutch fork pie pumpkin flowers either. We're gonna have to just wait and see what it is and hope that it's not toxic. The goal is to let it vine out that way and maybe bring it out this way, and we'll just let it take over. We probably won't be able to walk through here very easily, but that'll be okay. Out in front of the muscadines, I have our volunteer dill patch, which has started to flower, which is exciting. Now, I had planted some cucumbers that the birds took out. Ideally, I'd like to have my cucumbers coming to maturity in time to pickle them with some of this fresh dill, but I don't have that this year. My favorite pickling recipe uses the flowering dill heads in the brine, and what I'm going to do is actually pre-make a bunch of the brine and either can it or keep it in the refrigerator so that later in the year when I do replant some cucumbers, I can just use that brine and still get the fresh, lovely dill flavor. You just not the same if you use dill seed or dried dill weed. So yeah, it looks like I'll have to get to doing that pretty soon. I want to use it while the flowers are open and we've got that lovely flavorful pollen. I will be leaving some of these to go to seed because dill is not a perennial plant. It does readily come back from the seed, and I would like for this to be a thing that goes on in my garden every year. Back here, you can see this little tiny purple cauliflower that I left in here, and I have decided to let this go to seed. What's interesting is that almost looks, yeah, that's mushy. That looks like it's trying to die, which is very interesting. Don't know what happened there, but these guys should flower and then set some seed pods, so we'll be able to collect seed from this purple cauliflower. I had a few purple cauliflower plants in here, and we have since harvested what we can out of them. I haven't taken the plant out yet. This here is a little bit of a mess. I do have some walking onions in here, which seem to not do super great throughout the whole year. This is one of the little bulbules that does look like it could set some roots soon, so I'm just gonna tuck that down over there, and hopefully it's got enough light right there. But these guys seem to peter out pretty quickly. Hopefully they come back when it gets a little bit cooler. I'll have to keep it weeded. So far, it doesn't look like I've done that. Here are the tomatoes from this angle. We are doing Florida weave trellising system, and I've had to come through and do it one other time since I took the video on the Florida weave trellising method, and it looks like I'm gonna have to come through and do it again because I like to try to get each row done about every 8 inches. So up here, almost. In a couple of days, I'll have to run another layer of twine, but it's working well. See, we've got our little heat masters coming on over here too. I have been pruning for airflow with these determinate plants because something that we need to do here. We get a lot of morning dew, and it has been quite rainy, but the plants are loving the rain so far. Hasn't caused too much of a disease problem in the garden yet. That white butterfly is a cabbage looper. You can't have my cabbage. I'm gonna come get that later. Here comes the sun to kiss the garden a little bit. You can see our purple bee balm has started to flower. For a couple of years, I thought that my bee balm should bloom red, and I was always surprised that it was purple. This year I remembered that it was gonna bloom purple. Most of the tomatoes in here are the Heat Master variety, and I've talked about how the only tomato that is not the Heat Master variety is this Dr. Witchy's tomato, which this is an indeterminate plant, and so it's gonna get really big. I'll probably elect to top it off when it's about the top of the trellising system here, but I keep forgetting that I do have a celebrity tomato in here, and this is another determinate variety. I bought this from our local greenhouse. The celebrity is putting on some flowers now. So yeah, there's actually 3 types of slicer tomatoes out here. The roselle plants that I have over here are actually getting big enough to where I had to take off their protection from my cats, and so that's exciting. It looks like an okra plant, and that's because they're in the same plant family. This one over here is a little bit smaller. This did get dug up by a critter, and I thankfully came out and saw it soon enough to replant it. That's gonna be okay. The Jerusalem artichokes that we put in this year are really big. They still have some growing to do, I am told, before they really get to the stage where they're going to flower, but gorgeous. Speaking of gorgeous, we'll do a grape update. I do not know how long these take to mature. This is our 2nd year with these Sunbelt grape vines, but it's our 1st year getting fruit off of them. So far, so good. Obviously, I haven't bagged all of the little fruits yet. I plan to. Maybe I'll leave some uncovered just so we can see if the birds mess with them. They may not. I haven't had a chance to ask my Amish friend about that. But speaking of the birds messing with things, over here is the blueberry patch. There is a volunteer tomato growing in it. I probably can't allow this for long because I don't want the tomato to overtake the nutrients and things from my blueberries, but I did have some of the blueberry clusters covered with little tool bags in our last video, and I decided to remove them, not because they weren't effective, they were, not because they got laden down with water when it rained and then was snapping branches, but because it was really annoying to have to remove each bag to get the 1 or 2 berries that had matured underneath. Blueberries do not mature all at the same time, and so it was really annoying to try to have to untie the bag just to get at 1 berry and then retie the bag. So I've left it. A viewer suggested that I put my scaredy owl, I've got one over there too, on a stick so that when the wind blew, it would move this around and have a little bit more efficacy in scaring the birds. And it may be working because there are some relatively ripe berries on here. They're not quite ready. They're almost there though. I have come through and picked a couple handfuls of ripe berries off of these bushes, and I don't see much, if any, bird damage yet. So, knock on wood for me. I have officially stopped harvesting asparagus. This guy isn't an asparagus. That is a dill, but most of this is asparagus. And you can see that the asparagus has set some of its little asparagus berries. Later on in the season, these will turn red. They are toxic, so don't eat them, but they'll have little black seeds on the inside. And by seed is one of the ways that asparagus can repopulate an area. They come back by crowns very readily, but also the birds eat the seeds and carry them away, and that is how things like this happen. This is a volunteer asparagus plant that very likely came up from seed. I'm gonna leave this here for now, and I'll move it when it gets a little bit bigger next year. This is starting to kind of turn into a chaos garden over here. I do need to come through and get out some very obvious weeds, like this guy. It's very easy to see and to pull. But yeah, there's some tomatoes in here. This is cilantro that has basically gone by. It went and flowered, and it's starting to put on little coriander berries. But yeah, see this? We don't need a whole bunch of tomatoes or whatever this weed is to shade out the strawberries. These strawberries do need some serious thinning, but the middle of summer really isn't the time for that. I'll worry about that when the crowns are dormant. Ooh. It looks like we are gonna get some more flowers. These are an ever-bearing variety. They do put a lot of their fruit on all at once in the start of the year, but then we'll get trickle harvests throughout the year. So hopefully we'll get some berries. There are some green ones here. We'll see. The insects or other critters like lizards and birds have really gotten the majority of the harvest. My elderflower bush, it has peaked. So it's basically done flowering. There are some flower buds here and there, but at this point, it's starting to mature the berries. We've got a bunch of little green berries on right now, and it does not take long for these to start to turn purple. And when it comes time to harvest the berries, I will show you what that looks like. Definitely too early right now. The Wild and Crazy Blackberry Patch is basically done flowering as well, and it is starting to ripen the fruit. You can see them starting to turn a little bit pink. The blackberries start out as a white flower and then a little green fruit, and then that green fruit starts to blush, and it's red for a little while before it turns black. And even when it turns black, it may not quite be ripe. It's a process. We're not there yet, but the process has started. So a sad update. This is the volunteer patty pan squash that just in our last vlog I was up talking quite heavily because it had looked so healthy and was doing so well, and it literally died like this in one day, which this happening likely means that the squash vine borer or some other pest like that has disrupted the nutrition going into the vine. I see ants. I don't really see evidence of squash vine borer. Not really. That's a leaf that's missing there, but sometimes when you see squash vine borer damage, you'll see what looks like sawdust near a hole that's literally bored into the vine. I don't see that here. I don't really know what happened, but I know that this plant is done for. The other dead things that are in this bed are potatoes. This is to be expected. Around this time of year, potato plants will come up nice and green. They'll flower, which we have seen, and then they'll die back. And at that point, we can harvest the potatoes underneath. These guys over here are a little bit younger, so we have the flowering stage happening on this side, but these ones are a little bit further ahead, and you can see the difference in the maturity of the plants. One of our members asked for an update on the grapevine that we have growing on our clothesline over here. This was a volunteer plant that was here when we moved here. There's a vineyard in town, it's about a mile up the road, and they grow a wine grape. And I don't know if that's what this is. That's what we're assuming it is. And it did flower. And a lot like the Carlos muscadine, the scent of this grape was very, very peppery. I could tell that it would make a really great wine just by the smell of the flowers. But for some reason, the flowers bloomed and I don't see any grapes. I don't know what happened at all. I was reading that most grapevines are self-pollinating. I don't know if that's true of this variety, but I don't know. We don't have any fruit that I can see. Now don't mind my overgrown lawn. We've had lawnmower issues the last week or so, but in the kids' garden, they have a ton of growth going on. Oh my gosh, it's amazing to see. We probably need to cut back some of this sweet million tomato. There's 2 tomato plants here, just so his pepper plants can get some sun and a leg up. This kind of thing is so crazy to see. I think there's 5 pepper plants in here. And he's got some little baby lunchbox peppers coming on. These plants are definitely gonna need more sun, and it would be smart of us to give these plants some more sun while we're having these rainy days, because if the peppers have been so used to being shaded and then we suddenly put them in full sun by taking out some of these branches, then they have the chance of scalding. So being able to trim these back when we're getting some intermittent cloud cover is good. It'll help reintroduce them to the sun more slowly. But yeah, clearly the plants are loving the situation over here. Their cucumbers have really started to take off. I think one of these is a salt and pepper cucumber, and I can't remember what the other variety is. They did have, ooh, that scared me. There's a bumblebee doing its bumblebee thing in there with a little baby cucumber. So they'll have fruit in no time. Addie has some zinnia over here, and it looks like she has a bud that's very close to flowering. That will be exciting. She is growing some dragon egg cucumbers, which are a different shape. You can see one forming down there. She also has a slicer tomato. I forget which one this is. It's either a Belgian Giant or a Dr. Witchy's. More of the same over here. They have a cucamelon, a couple cucamelon plants on this little baby trellis. This is gonna be crazy once this cucamelon really does the thing that cucamelons do. It's gonna overtake this whole bed and be wild and crazy, but we love it. Speaking of, this is their volunteer ground cherry bed, which these are really, really tall plants. That might be in part due to them being super packed in here. We never did thin out any of these plants, but look at, they still have quite a bit of fruit. And so that's exciting. All these little green lanterns, these are all the little fruits, and they're not ready until they get nice and papery, and very frequently they drop, which is how you can end up with a lot of volunteers, because they just kind of fall all over the place and break down in the soil, and you get stuff like this happening, which makes us very happy. We love ground cherries. Their green stalk is doing pretty well. They've got this lettuce that volunteered in here that is starting to flower, and I think we'll let it. Well, looky here. I can put, I think we need to come through with some little garden staples to help hold these runners from the strawberries in place, but we can take these strawberries and put them in the empty cups to help fill out the green stalk like that. I think we'll update you on the lane growing space before we end in the greenhouse. Last week we talked about these grow bags and then a couple beds down there that I had filled with new soil. This year it was the Miracle-Gro Organics, and it seemed like the nutrition just washed right out of the bag super fast, and I had to add in some fertilizer. These plants have bounced back in a way that makes me so happy to see. Lots of new growth, and they've greened up quite a lot. I have started to kind of bend these cowpeas into the trellis so that they can kind of grab on and start doing the climbing thing that they do. There's some cucamelons down here that have definitely started to climb, that's for sure. And then this is another roselle plant right here. I think I started 8 roselle seeds and got 7 plants. I put 6 of them out. That's gonna be a lot of roselle, but that's kind of gonna be something that we don't really see a harvest out of until around fall time. My husband helped me put up this cattle panel trellis. I don't know if I really talked about this in the last garden tour, though this trellis was up here in the last garden tour. The tomatoes that are below the trellis do have quite a span before they reach up to the trellis, more so in this bed down here, which, holy moly, look at these plants. This makes me really happy. But what I had to do to help support the plants to get them up to where they could climb the trellis is I put one of these tomato clips around them with some of this tomato twine, and I basically made a leader up to the trellis that the tomato could grow on, and it's worked. Now we are at the point where we're clipping them onto this cattle panel, and they're doing quite well, though I will say this tomato does not look like a Belgian giant to me. These are supposed to be Belgian giant tomatoes. This guy looks a little less than happy. I guess we'll see what happens with that. That doesn't look super great. Kind of looks a little bit mildewy, I'm not really sure. But we have some fruit coming on down here. And if I had seen this tomato plant volunteering anywhere else in the garden, I would not assume that these tomatoes were Belgian giant tomatoes. I had saved these seeds myself. I'll have to look at the seed packet because it was probably from a few years ago. I don't think this is seed that I saved from last year, but it might be. Anyway, tomato flowers have everything that they need in them to pollinate themselves, and all they need is a good breeze. Usually tomatoes kind of breed true. This is an heirloom variety, but we do have quite the abundance of pollinators around here, and I'm guessing that we had some cross-pollination happen with the seeds that I saved. Because this here is not a Belgian giant, it actually has some purple streaking in it and a different shape. I don't know. And this truss, this is not a Belgian giant truss. I don't really know what's happening here, but this is not what I thought I planted. It's a mystery. All the plants that are in this bed plus this one were sown from the same seed packet, which was saved from the same fruit. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're all going to be the same. Pollination's really weird, and we talked about that a couple of weeks ago with the squash that I planted from saved seed as well, that grew 3 different squash types. Very strange. The same thing could happen with our tomatoes, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. That is a lot more like what I'm used to seeing from a Belgian giant. So this guy might be closer to what I planted this for, and this one is not. This one is so weird, but I look forward to seeing what it's like. Down here are some Dr. Witchies that I also grew from saved seeds. This guy looks correct, so we might be okay over here. And then down here are 3 Berries Crazy Cherry plants, which they are absolutely doing their thing. The Berries Crazy Cherry puts on these massive trusses of blooms, which turns into massive clusters of fruit. Look at that. That is just insane. And you can see that we've already got some fruit set going on over here. So these mature to a light yellow and they're very delicious. Alrighty, into the greenhouse, under the shade cloth we go. Now I haven't watered in here in a couple days, but we've had a lot of rain, and the rain does trickle down through the greenhouse, which is one reason that I'm growing in raised beds in here, because especially over the winter time, this can be a massive problem. Our farm is sitting on clay soil, and it is like straight clay. It gets super, super hard when it's dry and super, super wet, sticky, muddy when it's wet. And for plants to sit down in that clay soil without a break, it's not good for them. I have had a lot of success growing in our clay soil, but I have a greenhouse so that we can grow over the winter. Obviously we get to utilize it in the summer too, but winter time is really when it's the worst as far as being super wet and mucky in the greenhouse. So the raised beds have been awesome. Now I think it was last week where we talked about these spaghetti squash. These are some spaghetti squash that I grew from seed that I saved out of spaghetti squash that I grew 2 years ago. And when I planted in here, I planted 4 spaghetti squash seeds on this side and 4 spaghetti squash seeds on this side. Ooh, look at that guy. No, sir. I think this one is called an army worm. It's not welcome. Chuck, 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 chuck. There we go, that one found it. Anyways, the squash plants that I grew out of the seed that I saved from the spaghetti squash, I got 3 different squash varieties. And one of them ended up being toxic, and I could tell it was toxic because it tasted very bitter. I pulled all of those toxic plants out, which was 5 out of the 8 plants. Very sad. These 2 plants, there's 2 spaghetti squash plants here that ended up being a spaghetti squash like I had hoped for. They got to stay, and then so did this one. This is obviously not a spaghetti squash. It is something else, but this is not toxic. So we've been keeping and eating these. They're very good. But the spaghetti squash was acting like it needed some nutrition. The vines had stopped growing, and the female blossoms that it had started to produce were turning brown and drying up before they ever opened. So it wasn't a pollination issue. I assumed it was more of a nutritional issue. The plant decided, hey, we're not gonna put energy into trying to produce fruit because we don't have enough energy to do so. So I fertilized in here and watered, and that seems to have done the trick, because not only have we gotten a lot more growth out of the vines, they have put on some female flowers and set some more fruit. So that was good. So far, squash bugs have been very minimal in here. I have seen them, and so far no problems with squash vine borers, but you know, now that I said that, this will probably be dead by next week. I hope not. Let's see, this little flower was open this morning and just good. This is what we were seeing. So this was probably before the plant decided that it had enough energy to actually produce fruit. See this little dried up fruit here? This is where we get to where the plant was taking up more nutrition. And see, there's a good one there too. These spaghetti squash, it's kind of an illusion. It might look like it's coming from down here, but there's actually a vine that's coming over this way and has come up and it's setting fruit. So really happy to see that. I had planned to start some more spaghetti squash in the onion beds when I emptied those, and I have emptied this side of the greenhouse. I haven't filled it back up again because I want to do some soil testing in these beds so that I can amend it properly and not wind up with an imbalance. That's something that we've been battling for a year or so in this greenhouse, is soil imbalances, and I want to know exactly what we're working with so I know how to proceed before we plant again in here. And I may plant some more spaghetti squash over here still, even though this has cut up, because I really did hope for more fruit than what I think we're going to be able to get off of these. But yeah, in the place of the spaghetti squash that I took out over here, I actually transplanted some tomatoes that had volunteered in this space, we've got this gorgeous beauty over here that I don't know what it is. I had thought maybe it was a strawberry tomato. It's a variety that I grew in here last year. It doesn't quite look like it because the strawberry tomato does have purpling and purple streaks in it, and I don't really see that happening here. Gorgeous long truss. I don't know what color these are going to ripen to, so this is a lovely surprise. Same with this one. I don't really know what's happening here. Kind of looks like there might be some berries, crazy cherry influence on the trusses, but I'm not quite sure. This could be a yellow currant tomato. The jury's still out on this one. I think that these two might be a blue cream berry variety. I thought, yeah. See, we have some little fruit set here, but I'm not seeing the bluing that can happen on these plants, but maybe that is to come. Sometimes when you grow a variety of tomato in the shade that is supposed to have some purpling on it, you get a lot less of an intense purple color. That could be part of the problem. We have these squash plants here, and I do have a 30% shade cloth over the greenhouse, and so this still might be that variety, just expressing a little bit less purple because of having more shade. We've got some tomatoes over here too. These are also the Sweet Million variety. So far I haven't seen any fruit set over here, but she's trying. The Volunteer Malabar spinach has been growing like crazy. It loves the heat, and we are taller than me at this point. This is where that plant ends up. Ignore this poor sad baby I let die. This here was a gorgeous petunia plant, but she gone. There you go. With that out, you can see better what's going on over here. Cucamelons going absolutely berserk. They are to the top of the trellis and then beyond, which is awesome. This is going to be a really beautiful wall of fruit going on over here. We've had lots of little flowers popping up, and I haven't really noticed any fruit development yet. Oh, here's one. A little cucamelon. Maybe it's about 2 weeks away from harvest. Oh yeah. This one's a little bit more developed. That's exciting. I need to pay close attention here. I really like to eat cucamelons fresh as well as ferment them. This here is a ground cherry that volunteered. I grew a ton of ground cherries here in the greenhouse last year. And just like in the kids' garden, they volunteer back very readily, and so I knew we'd see some here. See that gorgeous little flower? I'm gonna let that go. On the other side of this trellis, I have some elephant garlic that I planted, and it has started putting up the garlic scapes, which means we are not super far from harvest on the garlic. I need to come through and get these scapes out. There's a whole bunch of them. They are very good sauteed in scrambled eggs. I actually saute them with vegetables as well. They're very, very tender, a lot like fresh asparagus. But yeah, if we let this go, this would make a beautiful flower that kind of looks like an onion flower, but that can impact the bulb below. And the bulb is really what I want to harvest. So I am going to be pulling these off. Over on this side of the greenhouse, this is where I still have a lot of onions planted. There's a ton of weeds growing in the walkway here. This is actually a volunteer lettuce that I'm gonna let go to flower. But yeah, the onions over here are a little bit further behind than the onions that I just took out over there. But these guys are due to be harvested really soon as well. I can tell that because the necks are getting soft. The pepper bed over here is doing amazing. Look at how big these plants have gotten in no time. We had actually topped these plants way down. Goodness, I don't even know if we're gonna be able to see the point at which I topped these off, but they bushed out quite well. Lots of flowers coming on, and I did notice that we had some baby fruits. Where did it go? Right here. Some jalapenos. It's been a while since I've had very many jalapenos growing. I was a victim to Peppergate a couple years in a row where I thought I planted jalapenos. I had bought some plants and I had bought some seeds that were labeled jalapenos, and I got banana peppers instead. I think that happened to a lot of us. Here's my tater pepper. It is flowering as well. This is a jalapeno and habanero cross. So I'm excited to see the shape of these. We've got some flowers, so it won't be long. Down here is one of the most exciting parts of the entire garden to me. This whole trellis is full of armpit melons, and the armpit melon is something of an accidental creation here on my farm. It's a combination between a Kajari melon and a Charente melon. Totally happened by accident. It was a situation where I saved some seed, I planted the seed, and what came up was not what I expected, but it's so good. I call it the armpit melon because it's very musky in smell, but also very melony and fruity, so it kind of smells like you've been outside sweating like I am right now, and instead of going inside and taking a shower, you just try to mask it by putting on some flowery deodorant and going about your day, and it doesn't quite do the job. That's what these smell like, but they taste really, really great with almost like a savory aftertaste. Super awesome, and I'm trying to stabilize the seed. So we've planted only armpit melons this year. Last year I had an issue with some of the seed that I planted. I was getting some things that weren't quite an armpit melon, but the armpit melon does start out fuzzy like this, and so it looks promising now. And so we had to go back a generation so that hopefully we have all what I consider the true armpit melon, and I've only planted armpit melons on my farm so that hopefully we don't get any cross-pollination that kind of messes things up. I really want to stabilize this, and apparently it can take 7 or 8 generations to get a seed that breeds true. So fingers crossed. I'll be saving the seed from the fruit that look the most like what I am trying to achieve with that. The plants are doing well, and they look exactly as they should at this stage. Fuzzy little thing. There's one there too. Also super interesting, I had planted these maypop seeds from seed that I saved a while ago. And apparently I ran out of patience in waiting for them, because we did get some maypops coming up. So I am going to baby these and likely save them in pots to put along the trellis in the perennial garden. I have those 2 maypop plants that I bought, and then we'll be able to put these a little further up the trellis when the loofah comes out and when the sunflowers die back. So we'll be able to fill out the trellis pretty nicely by this time next year. I may keep those in pots this year. My beans have really passed their prime at this point. These are Kalima bush beans. I need to actually probably come through and harvest a little bit later. But a lot of times with this variety, I'll get a flush of blooms and a flush of fruit, and then the plants kind of almost go dormant for a week or so, 2 weeks, maybe 3, and then they'll put on a second flush that is bigger, and because of that we get more harvest out of the second flush. I actually wasn't aware that this variety would do that kind of thing until last year, when I just happened to leave the plants in the ground because I didn't have anything else to put there, and at some point they started to produce again, and it was a lot more beans than I had gotten the first round. So I'm intentionally waiting for that this time. Oh yeah, this onion bed definitely looks like I need to harvest. I will take you over into the barn where I have my onions and show you those before the garden tour is over. I've been looking for, oh here we go. I was gonna say I've been looking for blooms on these lima beans and I hadn't seen them yet. They kind of grow on this spike with all these little flowers, and those flowers will eventually become the lima beans. This is more of like a set it and forget it. With the green beans, I need to harvest every so often. With these guys, because I'll be harvesting the dry beans, I can just let them develop and dry out and harvest them, you know, 1 or 2 times towards the end of the season. So in my barn here is where I have some of the onion harvest. This is half of the greenhouse worth of onions. And honestly, I've been very pleased with the size of the onions, considering how imbalanced and how fresh and new my soils are in there. It usually takes 3 or 4 years for a garden space to really get cranking as far as the microbial life that's in the soil, the mineral content, balancing out the nutrition and things. So I'm super happy that we got any decently sized onions. These are all hybrid varieties that I got from Dixondale Farms as plants. This is sweet yellow onion. We have a white onion, Superstar is the variety. And then we had the red candy apple onions. These are all kind of small over here. These onions are supposed to be smaller than the varieties down there. And yeah, overall, I'm really happy with them. Now, this curing rack my husband made, and I did have a comment recently, which I think is probably on the right track, saying that they think that my onions need a little bit more space so they can have more airflow and cure better. I imagine that that at least wouldn't hurt. This is my first time curing onions in this type of volume. I have cured onions before by just laying them out on a table, and they actually kind of were stacked up a little bit, and it worked pretty well. For now, I'm leaving these here as they are. I think I'm going to start actually preserving some of these onions in different ways this week And as I come down and collect some onions to preserve, I'll be picking them out strategically to help, you know, kind of pull here and there and give the onions that I'm going to leave to cure a little bit more airflow. And so just something to think about. But yeah, this is only half of the onions that we have planted in the greenhouse, or half of the bed's worth of onions. Today, I actually purchased some onion seeds, some of the sweet yellow onion seeds from Johnny's, I think it was, so that I could start my onions from seed next year. It seems like it's a pretty simple process. This year I did buy these started plants from Dixondale, and that was a good call, I think, for me for my first real like large onion planting. But I've had enough success with it where I feel a little bit more confident to take the extra step and start my onions from seed, so I'm excited about that. Anywho, if you're accustomed to watching my garden tours but not necessarily the weekly homestead vlogs, but you're interested in the preservation of things like this, I encourage you to start watching. Probably from here on out, we're going to have a lot of preservation of things out of the garden coming up soon, and it starts with these.